I'm pleased and honored to have in the studio with me attorney Benjamin Crump, who is representing the family of 12-year-old Tamir Rice in Cleveland. He also represented the Trayvon Martin family. Mr. Crump, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me, Tom.
I'm pleased to have you with us. ParksCrump.com is the website, ParksCrump.com?
Yes, sir, ParksCrump.com.
Okay.
And I'm at Attorney Crump on Twitter.
Okay, Parks Crump is the firm,
yes,
the law
sir.
firm. Okay, I got it. Okay. And at Attorney Crump, CRUMP, MP for Twitter. So tell me, what are we waiting for with regard to Tamir Rice?
Tom, it is unexplainable why it would take 6 months into an investigation that has a surveillance video that covers the entire incident, other than what many of my colleagues and friends from my community say. They are trying to sweep the death of this 12-year-old child under the rug, hoping that we forget about it.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like that happens a lot. It happens way too much in America. I don't think this one's going to go away. I mean, this if there ever was a case of just egregious police misconduct, and on top of that, the cop who killed him, in his previous job, he had been written up as somebody who shouldn't have a gun, essentially.
Absolutely, and we can't let it go away, because to let them sweep it under the rug would mean that Tamir Rice's life didn't matter. And we got to tell all the facts of it. The fact that the officer never should have been hired in the first place, that he had previously been forced to resign from a job that found in his employment records that he was unfit to be a police, that he was, quote, untrainable, no matter how many hours we trained him. But then just look at the videotape, Tom. Just if your audience across America, just go look at that videotape and see how they recklessly drove across that playground. If there were any other children out there on that playground, we may be dealing with more than just one death, and then less than 1 second.
Right. Less than 1 second to pull out a gun and kill a kid, a 12-year-old boy.
And on the heels of this consent decree with the Department of Justice, we're going to find out real soon how sincere they are, because they haven't told the truth about Tamir. They haven't admitted that there were mistakes made. They answered our lawsuit and said that Tamir Rice was responsible for his own death because he should have been more cautious, saying this about a 12-year-old child, and that they told him 3 times to put his hands up and drop the weapon, despite what we see on that surveillance video, which contradicts completely that presentation that's what they said.
And now the Justice Department is saying to the Cleveland Police Department, you must start reading the resumes of your applicants, and you must stop pistol whipping people. I mean, pistol whipping people has been illegal in New York City since '74. I mean, what the hell is going on in this country?
Tom,
pardon my phrase,
No, it does make you want to holler when you keep seeing these egregious things happen to unarmed people. And
we have, according to killedbypolice.net, as of right now, 455 people have been killed in the United States as of this day. In Louisiana, a fellow by the name Jesse Nickel Williams was killed yesterday. In Dalton Branch was killed, a black male. Unknown male in his 60s was killed yesterday. These are just 3 yesterday.
Well, Mr. Hartman, I put on a piece in Time magazine that said, until we stop the sanctioning of killing of unarmed people of color, then it's going to keep happening. If there is no deterrent factor where people go to jail for what they do, if there are no real consequences for the real-life fatalities that are being suffered at the hands and in the communities of black and brown people, it's not going to go away. Right. And even though I appreciate the consent decree, and you pray that it's going to be more than words on paper, I've often believed unless there are real consequences for these actions, nothing is going to change.
Great Britain has had 2 people killed by police in the last 2 years. We have had 455 in the last 5 months. Yeah, they're a larger country we're a larger country than they are, but only 6 times larger. That's not a 6-to-1 ratio. This is nuts. I mean, in Germany, it is roughly 1/6 the size of the United States. They've had nobody killed by police. In those countries, You have to. It's a career. You have to have essentially a college degree. Many of, if not most of their police are not even armed. They're not trained like soldiers and SWAT teams. They don't have all this military stuff coming down on them, and they hold them accountable. What's it going to take here? Wisconsin's the only state that's got a law, and that's the result of a father fighting for 10 years to have an independent police review board.
Yep. You know, Mr. Hartman, I was at the 50th anniversary of the March on Selma, and I got to be with some of my personal heroes, Attorney Fred Gray, Attorney Solomon Say. These were the civil rights lawyers who represented the African-American citizens of Alabama in their march and their fight to get to the ballot box.
Right.
And Congressman John Lewis and others, we were at a panel, and we started talking about Ferguson and what was going on there with the tragic killing of Michael Brown, who I represent his family. And they said, you have to remember, Ben, that 50 years ago when we were crossing the Edmund Pettus Bridge, it was the police who beat the hell out of us under color of law, and they were allowed to do so because the powers that be allowed it to be such. They wanted to say, keep that community in their place, keep the status quo. And they said 50 years later, nothing has changed. The powers that be are still saying this is allowed for the police to treat minority communities like this. And I love your book on equal protection because it talks about how capitalism and corporations control a lot of things, and when they allow things to happen, it happens. When they say we're not going to allow it to happen, it won't happen. So with this consent decree, it's the powers that be in Cleveland who have to say, we're going to make sure this consent decree isn't just words on paper.
It seems to me there's a good news, bad news story here. We're talking with Benjamin Crump, the attorney for Tamir Rice and Trayvon Martin and Michael Brown's families. And that is that the good news, I suppose, is that this disruptive technology of cell phone cameras are now ubiquitous, even in poor communities and communities of color. And so white Americans who, frankly, control the political power in this country and have since its founding, and the economic power as well, by and large, are starting to realize the horrors that people of color have been living with even in the recent era. Number one, with regard to policing. But number two, then you get the people like Bill O'Reilly going, oh, there's no such thing as white privilege. You just go back to sleep, white people. Don't pay any attention to this. In the minute we have left, do you see an awakening happening among your brothers and sisters who are white, and do you see changes happening in communities of color that might help that process?
I'm optimistic because at the advent of technology, as you said, it's showing it in graphic, vivid detail that police do plant evidence on people, and that we have to reject the standard police narrative that we shot an unarmed person of color and we had to do so because we were in fear of our life. They were about to kill us. But then when we watch the video, you say, no, you were not. Right. There was no reason for you to jump up on a hood and shoot into a car 40 times and say that you're in fear of your life. Or with Walter Scott in Port Charleston, South Carolina, you weren't in fear of your life. But just as a parting shot, think about in Charleston how America was ready to accept the narrative, even though he had 4 shots in his back, that he was in fear of his life. Until that video came. And if that video wouldn't have came, they would have accepted that narrative yet again.
As they have been doing for years after years after years. Thank God things are slowly changing. At least they're starting to change, and you're part of that. Thank you
so much, Mr. Hartman.
Great to see you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much for joining us.